Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, inspiring journalists, writers, readers, and nature lovers to embrace creativity and nature connection for positive well-being. I'm your host, Anna Williscroft. Join me for honest conversations with people who use writing, journaling, and time in nature to find clarity, process life's experiences, and live a more fulfilling life. Whether you're a seasoned writer, a curious beginner, or simply someone seeking a deeper connection to life, this podcast is for you. It's wonderful to have you here today. Today's guest is somebody who's found her way back to herself through writing, and in doing so has created beautiful practices to help others do the same. Nora Wilhelm is a writer, poet and founder of Well Change Atelier, a platform for creative regeneration, and she's here to share her embodied poetry practice, her lunar journaling approach, and what really happened when she sat down to write her first book. Let's begin. In this episode, I'm joined by Nora Wilhelm, a social entrepreneur, change worker and writer from Switzerland who, after years of giving everything to her work, found her way back to herself through the powerful act of creating. Nora is the founder of the Well Change Atelier, a platform for creative regeneration, and the host of Writing with Flow, a program that helps people build a writing routine that feels sustainable. In 2024, Nora wrote her first book, discovering along the way that showing up daily and gently is far more potent than waiting for the perfect conditions. Nora has a beautiful poetry practice she calls Embodied Poetry, which we'll be exploring today. Recognised as a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree in Switzerland and a UNESCO Young Leader, Nora brings both lived experience and genuine heart to everything she creates. Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, Nora.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. So I'm excited to get into finding out exactly what you do, where you come from. But let's go through a few quick fire round questions first, which I always like to ask the guests, a way of settling in for everybody. So what was the last book that you read and how does it connect to your work, your purpose, or where you are in life right now?
So recently I read Ledges and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and it's a cozy fantasy where an ogress that was a former mercenary decides to open a coffee shop, and she opens a coffee shop in a context where there has been no coffee so far. So it's very cute. It's a story of becoming, of stepping into your new purpose, of making bold choices, of not knowing really what you're doing and kind of figuring out along the way. And I think it relates to my work and where I am in my life right now, in the sense that I very often feel on a daily basis, not necessarily like an ogress opening my first cafe, but like someone who's figuring it out, right? It's like writing your first book, discovering what publishing is all about, how self-publishing works, exploring how to run the different programs that I run. So it's just a lot of things right now that I'm taking leaps of faith, doing things for the first time and kind of following that heart's calling.
Yeah, sounds as though the book came into your life at the right time.
Yeah, I can highly recommend it if you like, especially if you like cozy fantasy. It's really, really lovely book.
Yeah, well, I'll include the name of the title and the author in the show notes. It sounds like my kind of book as well. I think when we're with an entrepreneur in whatever shape or form, we get so many ideas and we have to really give them time to percolate, to use another coffee metaphor. So it's a great title.
Yeah.
Keeping on the line of books then, what was your favorite childhood book? And when you look back at that now, can you see how that shaped your relationship with words or perhaps how the way you express yourself?
I read a lot of books as a kid, really whatever I could get my hands on. And I remember really enjoying, there was this one kind of series, I think it might have been French, but I grew up in Geneva, so I just kind of, yeah, read what was there about a lady detective, and she was very smart and solving all of these crimes. And then from there, I think I kind of got into the first fantasy books. I couldn't even tell you anymore exactly what that was, but it was kind of that era when we started to have the first fantasy books, at least to my knowledge, that had female heroines and that were really badass. And, now we have a revival of this whole dragon riding thing going on. But I think at the time, that's also what that book was about. So I think I maybe found in books more so than in my immediate surroundings, inspiration and role models. Like I often felt like the odd one out, or like people didn't really understand my fascination with certain things or my strong tendency for justice and fairness and questioning how things are done, which was sometimes very inconvenient for people like, school teachers and such. who would rather not be questioned. So I think, yeah, in those books, I kind of found people I could relate to and a little bit identify with. And hopefully, I would say over time, maybe this has also helped make me a little bit less afraid of pursuing what I felt was mine to do and speaking my mind and standing up for the causes that I believe in.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I relate to that a lot, thinking about what I used to read in childhood. A lot of them were mystery type novels where you'd have a group of young people that would just go out and see something that they thought the crime has happened here, and then they would go out and solve that on their own with a pack of sandwiches and lemonade and the dog with them. And it gives you a little bit of independence and a bit of confidence, all wrapped up at the same time. I used to read some fantasy ones. I don't know if you had them, but they were, you would read a few chapters, get into the story. And it's right what you say actually about the feminine heroines, but they were a bit later coming, I think. But yeah, I used to read the chapters and then you get to the end of a chapter and you had a choice of what would happen to the characters. And then that would depend on which page you turn to next to
Oh,
read the rest of the story.
that sounds exciting. Maybe a
Yeah.
little stressful. I think I would have picked and then just read the other one also just to be sure.
Yeah, curiosity get the better of you if you don't like the chapter that you get referred to. Yeah, but I mean it's exploration and curiosity, isn't it? It's all of that which I think when we're younger, that really does feed us. And I do think sometimes as an adult, we lose that a little bit. And certainly with your career and standing up for everything that you've done, you've probably never lost that. It's been a real driving force for you.
Yeah, it's true. I think once I got into it, I there was no way I could let it go. I was on a panel recently about impact careers at a university, and it was interesting because to me it was never even a consideration. Like, do you want to do work that is meaningful and that makes a difference or not? To me was like an obvious question, and I think I also really align with what Jane Goodall says, like everything you do makes a difference, and the question is whether you want to kind of co-decide what that difference is or pretend it's not there, right? So to me, it's just about making that conscious decision to realize that everything we do has an impact, how we interact has an impact, the things we buy or don't buy, the votes we cast for the future every single day, right? Not just around election time, is to me really, really central to my life. And yeah, maybe this kind of relationship with at least female presenting characters in books that had the courage to really pursue what was theirs to do, to bring their gifts to the table, made a difference to me, gave me some solace in a way. And I'm still reading a lot of fantasy now. Like it's actually the main genre that I read, and I find that it helps me sometimes. Sometimes it's about escaping the world the way that it is. Other times I find that it really helps me actually understand what is going on in our world better by seeing the analogy. And just because we're not fighting monsters the same way that certain people in the fantasy books are, in a way we are, right? Like just not as overtly perhaps. So yeah, that's really helped me. And it's actually also fairly surprising to me how people, who may read all of these books where it's very often, right, in this case, a young female heroine that goes against the tyrant, against the evil king, against the establishment, and whether it's Katniss or Aelin or right, whatever the name is, it often has this kind of flavor, and then don't really embody this in their lives, right? So like also I don't think neither Aelin nor Katniss nor anyone else would have endorsed fascism or would have tolerated the stripping of our rights, et cetera, right? So sometimes I feel like we could get a little bit more literal about the inspiration that we actually get from the books that we read.
Yeah, for sure. Rather than just having them as that escapism, which you mentioned is something there anyway, but actually taking that further after you've read the book or you've watched the series or you've heard the lecture and actually, yeah, coming back to what you said before, it is making that difference. It's making that conscious effort to move forward, to be a part of making that difference, and where do you fit in that?
Yeah. And you can ask yourself, what would Sorengale do? What would Aelin do? What would Katniss do? Right? Whoever has inspired you, what does Hermione do? Whoever, right? Like,
Yeah.
what would she do in this situation? And maybe that inspires a little bit of courage.
Yeah, it's reminded me as you were talking. It's slightly different, but we went to the cinema at the weekend to see a film called Hoppers, which is an animation. And it was about a girl who she just really connects to nature through her grandma and a relationship with a grandma. And they sit by this lake so many times and look at the wildlife and the beavers and everything that goes on there. And then as she gets a little bit older, the mayor is trying to build a freeway over the top of where the lake is, and she's standing up, the only person it seems is standing up for this little glade area with the lake. And you can really see how the impact of that, and like any of these animations, they're meant for children, but they're so emotional as well. And there really is an adult message there and a metaphor of we need to pay attention to what's going on here. And we're nature, we're every living thing. Non-humans have just as much rights to be there as we do as the dominant species. And I get on my soapbox about that in my journal and workshops and that quite often, because I think we all need to make a stand and make a difference, be a part of making that difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about books. Now, if we talk a little bit about poems, because you have been writing poems since childhood, and I'm curious to know if that practice has stayed with you in the same form over the years, or has it changed into something different as you've, experienced life and you've grown up yourself?
I really wonder where that came from. I think maybe I was just quite dramatic as a child, experiencing things very deeply and feeling like I don't know if I didn't necessarily have the tools to make sense of them, but I kept a journal. I still have them, and it's quite funny to read back what my concerns were and how I was processing everything that was happening around me at the time. And there's one particular poem that's quite funny that I wrote about my guinea pig who passed away, and he was called Pikachu. And I was very heartbroken. And so
No.
I wrote a poem about him and how he's left this plane. But yeah, I would say it's for sure evolved from there, but it has remained a path to processing. So it's rarely that I'm like, I should write a poem to post, or I should write a poem for this specific purpose. Usually it comes up if I give myself enough space to process what's alive. And sometimes inspiration kind of strikes more when I am tuned in to what is going on. So for example, if I am in a container where there is that spaciousness and maybe I'm in nature, maybe, right, I don't have the distraction of technology, etc. And then something kind of comes through. And in recent years, I kind of have been able to start to put words to the process that I go through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, right, with this embodied poetry, or I also call it soul volume poetry sometimes, because to me, it's all about like cranking up the volume of your own soul, like what's already there, what you deep down already know, maybe is important, the voice that's whispering always, and just kind of allowing that to come through. And sometimes I find that it comes through more clearly when speaking in metaphors or images rather than, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. So I've kind of started, exploring guiding groups through that process to also like turn off a little bit, the everything that blocks our creative process, like the instant criticism that shows up, the judgment, the fears, all of those things, and kind of have a process that bypasses that a little bit so we can access the wisdom that's actually there. And the second thing I've added to my practice over time is this more collective dimension of actually either co-creating poems based on, writings that come from that deeper place that has been facilitated before. And sometimes I'll even like kind of almost like channel a poem from a collective experience. So I'll maybe write down phrases that people have said over the days. If there's like a retreat, a gathering, a training, a inspiring conference, I'll take some notes of what's moving, the images people are using. And then on the last day, I'll like sit with it and let it flow into a text. And I've done this a couple of years ago at a big conference in Austria called Art of Change, which was all about, transformation, paradigm shifts. And then I actually got to perform it with a guitarist, which was really nice. So yeah, there's this beautiful kind of almost like feeding it back to the collective. And it's not a transcript, right? It's not a picture or a video, but it is somehow coming from that collective experience. And I found that really beautiful, really meaningful. I'm always super nervous when I do it, but I'm also like kind of electrified, you know? I really feel like I'm connecting to something deeper and really in tune with the pulse of life or what may be going on.
Yeah, I understand the feeling of nerves there. And, I think there's an element of you being excited about the prospect and what's going to come out of that experience. And also wanting to share that and, do a good job of it in a way, do it justice. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. So, I mean, feel free to read one of your poems as well. And it'd be lovely to know whether that's come from, the collective experience or just you being in having that experience and putting that into words as a text. I'm interested to know as well, do you get a sense of when to write something just for you alone, or whether the time is right for it to be from a collective approach? Yeah, I guess for somebody that's never really thought of themselves as a poet, or perhaps enjoys reading poetry, what does that process look like? How would they maybe start that?
Yeah, I don't even know that I would think of myself as a poet. I always found that these labels are stifling. They shouldn't be, but I guess in school and then socialization, like we get these ideas of like what a real artist is and a real poet. And I would never stand up and be like, yeah, I'm a poet, especially not first and foremost. But yeah, there's also beauty in reclaiming those labels, of course, right? So if you listener are like able to do that, amazing. I think I have to work my way towards that. But yeah, so I think the first thing that I do in all of my workshops is demystifying that term and that concept and making it very clear that this is a process that is about connecting to our own soul. And the value of a good poem, quote unquote, is not, is it pretty? Is it nice? Like, would it get an award? Anything like that. Like, we are removing all of that external facing pressure or pictures of even what poetry is supposed to be like. I have no idea. I have never read poetry, not as a kid, not as a teenager. Later on, I discovered some Hafiz, Rumi, right? Like Rupi Kaur, like I started to read a bit more, but I was never exposed to that. So writing came before the concept of what poetry should be. And I really encourage everyone who might have that in their mind about stanzas or anything like that, completely forget about it. I mean, if it's in your bloodstream and you know how to do it and it flows naturally, great, go for it. But don't let that idea or that picture be something that kind of blocks you from actually writing what's there. So that's like step one. We demystify it, we remove all of that. And the thing that I then kind of focus on is helping people kind of let something come through. And that sounds a little bit abstract, but very specifically what I do in the process is that I help people start to engage with metaphors. So first I do kind of a rapid fire, like very quick associative thinking exercise. It's really on purpose quick. And some people are like, oh, it's too fast, but it's on purpose because if we go too slow in this, the critical mind has time to come online. So we want to be quick. And so I'll be like, candle, and you write the first thing that comes to mind when I say candle. I'll say sunrise, you write what comes to mind. I'll say dancing, you write anything that comes to mind, a word, a couple of words, and we really go quite quickly like that. And then now I'll say, okay, I'll give you a metaphor. For example, the metaphor is a flower blooming. Now write about that. And in your mind, you decide, what does the flower blooming mean to you? Is it yourself? Is it how you've observed your mother bloom or not bloom? Is it a societal thing? Like, what is the flower that's blooming or not blooming? And write about that. And never say this is about societal collapse, right? Like write about the wilting flower. And then I say, okay, now think about, something that you would want to write about from your life, maybe something that's important to you right now, whether that's a loved one that has health challenges or something in the world that pains you or your relationship to your garden, anything, right? Like something that's meaningful to you. And now think of a metaphor to do that, right? And write about the metaphor, not about your garden, but write about the thing that is the metaphor that you've chosen. And I find that this yields incredible results. I mean, then there's many different exercises, right? That depending on the context, I'll weave in or out. But in essence, that's it. And this is something that I think anyone can try. I'm not trademarking this. I'm not gatekeeping this, right? This is really almost like I don't know, a technology for the soul that I'm very happy if, anyone tries it and sends me a message afterwards. I would love to hear. But yeah, I find that then from that place and writing in this way and with this level of inspiration and connection, what comes through is then often very moving. And that to me is like a good poem. Like, the poem does its job in a way or is good when it moves something, potentially in others if you read it, but mostly in you. Like if you read it and you feel like, oh, like sometimes people have tears in their eyes because they're seeing something in a different light or they're being mirrored in a way, or like it just kind of, opens your heart or warms you inside, whatever it is. But if it moves something, then you've gone there, right? You've gone to that place of depth. And if not, maybe the mind was trying to control and make rhymes and anything. And then that's fine. Get to, have that experience and then try again. But yeah, that's kind of the overall process. And a huge inspiration in getting there was learning from John Stubley from the Presencing Institute. And I was in a container about ecosystem leadership. So this is more my day job work that is all about change and systems change, etc. And I was in this cohort. And one of the things we practiced are social arts. So arts that are done collectively. And he was the poet kind of in that. And he truly is a poet. He writes a lot. And he guided us in exploring first poems in a similar way to what I've just described. I think I then focused a bit more on, the soul volume that I mentioned of personal discovery. And his focus is a bit more on that collective dimension, on the field, which I also find super interesting. I just had a bit less the opportunity to do that, except at this conference that I mentioned. So yeah, maybe I can read you a poem that
Yeah,
was
please do.
personal. hmm It was a personal poem, but it emerged in that container. It's an older piece. It must be from 2019 or so. But yeah, here we go. The grace of the moment, a swan folding its wings, a shiver running through me. The pain settles on the dark sea. Droplets and their ripples, faces and their fears, turning away from the well of healing, going where birds cannot fly, where we ride the waves without knowing the ocean. How can we learn to be present with what is, in its hurt and beauty, in its unexpected? How can we land gently and dive deep to where we need to be? How can we remain in the instant, gracefully, like a swan folding her wings?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
As you were reading there, it's amazing. Sometimes you can hear poetry and you think, oh, that's speaking to me in the moment. It's exactly what I want to hear in the moment. And I think sometimes that's why people get quite emotional when they hear poetry. They've had that way in with their own words, connect to themselves when they write it. But yeah, I as you started talking, immediately my mind went to a vision of a lake, and it went very dark and stormy and black to begin with, and the swan was head down, just not doing anything. And then the more that you talked, it brightened up and the swan became whiter, and then started just to very slowly, but move into the center. This is amazing what, and people listening to this or watching this will have completely different visions, and that will mean something completely different to them. And that's what I love about poetry, or even journaling prompts and visual exercises, is you get what you need from it at that time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think both us going through it and writing it is like an experience of almost like being your own oracle, your own tarot card deck, right? And kind of whatever comes out is like, oh wow, a mirror to something that's moving inside. And equally when listening or viewing a piece of art of any sort, right? Like what moves within us, I think it has this amazing power to let us connect to that which is inside and what is relevant right now. As you say, we hear what we need to hear in a way. And yeah, thank you for sharing that image. It definitely resonates a lot. To me, it speaks a lot about this, how hard and painful something can be. And then the moment that we are able to be with it, it shifts, right? Like
Yeah.
remaining in the instant, like staying with it, and how then if we are able to do that, maybe messily, maybe with grace over time and with practice, something really transforms. That's also what the poem speaks to me now. And maybe when I wrote it back then, it's many years ago now, I had another picture in mind, right? And that's
Yeah.
also kind of the beauty of this.
Yeah, yeah. So it can almost follow us or stay with us, and whatever's happening to us at a particular moment in time, it has a different meaning. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's a powerful thing. So when you with the collective aspect of the poetry on the collective level, do you is there times when, so you've explained how, you go through a workshop, or in a certain situation, and you take these little snippets, and then you're able to put that into a piece of text. Do you work in a way as well where you're with people and everybody contributes a sentence?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, that recently this collective poem at the Art of Change, I hosted a workshop where it was about this personal process, this embodied poetry soul volume process. And then at the end, I passed two sheets around the circle there. You would write whatever line right now speaks to you the most, or resonates the most, or feels like you want to contribute, and then fold it over. The next person adds their line. And then at the end of the workshop, I read that out. And that was, like a collective poem. I've done similar things at retreat centers or in different training settings and workshops. And it's always incredibly powerful and beautiful and quite magical to realize that, especially if the space was cultivated and, we reached a certain level of depth, the emergent co-created poem, it just lands, right? Of course, if someone is completely disconnected and right hasn't really engaged with any of the exercise and just write something random that will like throw the whole thing off a little bit. Hasn't happened to me yet, but it could. But yeah, just from that field and that we have been in together for the last, I don't know, 2 hours, maybe something really profound can emerge. And so then what I've done after that is I've just sat and reordered a little bit and translated, because in that case it was a mix between German lines and French and English lines. So I just made sure everything was at the time in German because it was a German speaking audience. And then, kind of, yeah, just restructured a little bit, added a few things here and there. Sometimes maybe you need to change. It's like a he to a she to a they, right? So just to make sure that if we speak of one object or person, that it stays consistent within the whole paragraph of the poem or whatever. And so yeah, it's just little bits of editing, but really keeping everyone's lines. That's very important. So I never remove a line. I only add or do tiny changes. And then that's what I kind of presented on stage and read for the whole audience with a guitarist. That was really, really nice, kind of just, strumming pattern alongside the reading of the poem. That was just so moving and beautiful. And people came to me afterwards, again, very moved with tears in their eyes and just sharing how much this reflected their experience. And they were, in some cases, very surprised by that. Like even people who hadn't been in the workshop, right? It's almost like the people who were in the workshop, these maybe 20, 30 people, were like a reflection somehow of the collective experience that even was happening on a larger scale of hundreds of people. So that's, yeah, that to me is absolutely magical. And I would love to do that more, but I never, like, I don't think I would put it out there kind of like a service because yeah, or maybe at some point, but it's more like I really want to feel it in the moment, right? That this is what is called for and that it's ripe and that it's here. And maybe I have too high aspirations because by now I know that I can also write a poem. If you were to tell me 5 things about you, I could write a poem that's, because I know you a bit less, maybe not as deep as if I was like your best friend, but it still may like, mirror some of your best qualities back to you or something like that. So it's something I've become, like more acquainted with, and I can kind of drop in a bit quicker, even with less information. But I, for now, like the freedom of just doing it when it feels right.
Yeah, you get that sense for when it's right. We were talking this morning. I've held a journaling workshop this morning, and it was only a small number of us, and we got onto it was a very the ladies were very willing to share, and I always say in the journaling that it's a safe space, and you only share what you feel comfortable with. It's an invitation to share. You don't have to, but they were all quite open. And one of the key things that came out of that was the connection that we need, particularly as females, having to have that connection to I suppose feel positive. loneliness came up quite a lot. And I think those collective experiences really do help to just shape us in that way and help to make us feel safe and get to know ourselves better. Self-awareness comes out of it. And it reminds me, I was talking to somebody on the podcast, a lady called Elaine Brooks, and she works a lot with awe and the wonders of the world, and the collective experience is one of the the eight wonders of the world in that sense of awe. And I think we do in those sorts of situations, energetically, emotionally, we do connect with each other. So it's a great experience. I love the sound of that. It's got me thinking, what is there any way that I could use it? If that's okay with you, is there any ways that I could use that in some of my workshops? Because I think it's a different level.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've been meaning to host an online version of these experiences for a long time. Somehow, everything always seems more urgent, everything else. But yeah, I would really love that, and absolutely, do give it a go anytime you'd like. And anyone who wants to connect or explore or learn more about the well in these spaces, super welcome. Yeah, I think it's really important to also like explore many different modalities, right? Like I also, for example, now we are running a journey called Living the Questions with Michelle, who's an artist and a really beautiful facilitator. And she works with painting, and we're going to do drawing and collage and, all sorts of different things. It's a very different modality. And I find that it really helps me to not be just writing, for example, but to engage different senses and different aspects of me, to also get out of my head a bit. And for example, also dancing, we have dancing workshops as well, like empowerment through embodiment, actually moving through the elements and our emotions, etc. Having this kind of almost like this palette of options with different teachers who really own their craft and their gifts. I may tend to be more right on the writing side, on the poetry side, and share and teach that. But to have all these different teachers come in with their gifts is just, it's so rich. It's so valuable.
Yeah, I love the analogy of having that palette, that almost like a platter of things that you can sample and then choose which you feel drawn to. And at any given moment, that could be the painting, it could be the writing, it could be the dancing, and it's whatever we need at that time. Yeah, it's fabulous. It's just it's creativity for the soul.
Absolutely. Anyone listening would be interested in a little workshop or a journey on that embodied poetry, writing from the soul, I would be super happy to organize that. I always find that it's I'm a manifesting generator in human design, if that speaks to anybody. But so I can initiate, but I also really like responding to feedback or to, hey, I would love this, and then I can make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll share all of the links as well in the show notes so that people can connect with you and find out more. It's interesting you should say about the human design. I did a human design a while ago. I'm a generator, so I know exactly when I'm in that mode of, feeling in flow with everything. And I immediately know when that's not happening for me. And yeah, I can clock up a 12-hour day and still have bags of energy to continue if it's the right experience or work that I'm involved in. Yeah, you've encouraged me to got a book down here somewhere on human design. You've encouraged me to pick that back up again and delve into that a little bit. One of my throat chakra is closed according to the human design. So when I first started doing the podcast and workshops and things like that, I used to find it really, really difficult because I was never very good at speaking out, and certainly being the person that all eyes are on me for a while. That just did not sit well for me. So I've really had to work on myself and nurture that. And the journaling has helped with that massively as well. So you're writing the feelings around it.
So do you mean that the throat, let me try again. Do you mean that the chakra center is defined or undefined? Like, is it kind of colored in or empty?
T, I think.
Yeah, so undefined. It's an interesting interpretation to think that, to me, that doesn't necessarily mean blocked. It does mean that it's a bit less like people with defined throat chakras, maybe a bit more like, this is my opinion and I'll stand by it, and I'll, right, like a bit more, maybe also this consistency of speaking very powerfully. And undefined may have more range as well, like, right? Like, so in a way, to me, especially as a podcast host, where it's also about like exploring many different perspectives and takes, and making space for that and allowing yourself to explore that. To me, that yeah, that really resonates. But yeah, it can be scary to show ourselves and speak our truth and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I like that reframe as well, so I shall take that. Sometimes it's just how you interpret it, isn't it? But yeah, I've always struggled, and there's again, you look back to childhood and certain things that have happened. I've been in certain situations where I've spoken up, and it's not been in the right sense, or it's not been taken in the right way, and a lot of that I think has kind of over the years has made me shrink a little bit. And only in the last year or so, or couple of years, have I started to kind of come out of that a little bit more. I've always been the person that's been behind the scenes a little bit. So yeah, to be at the front of things is easier now, but very, very difficult to begin with.
Mhm. I hear that.
So, Nora, we've talked about poetry and books from a reading point of view. And you started writing your first book in 2024, and you're currently in that process of publishing. And you put it all together by building a daily writing habit. But rather than setting a word count target or long writing sessions, you just committed to that daily pick up the pen, or get some words onto a document. Can you take us back a little bit to what that felt like when you first sat down to write? What made you decide that it was a book that you needed to write, or you wanted to write at that time?
Yeah, of course. So I knew that with Paraíma, my other project that is more about change and systems change, I had almost like three different groups or stages of change work or of activism, change making that people were engaged in. And the first group, I call them the seed group. These are people who are currently exploring what their contribution is. And this may be a question that they ask for the first time, maybe if they're very young or if they're having a midlife crisis and now they're like, I do need to change something. It's not working. I want to make a difference. But equally, it's also people who have gone through this process because it is a cyclical process many, many times. And so, for example, in my online program about this, the Change Work Compass, that is all about finding your purpose, we had a retired university sustainability professor from one of the top 10 best universities in the world, right? So someone who was very committed, had a big career in this, and then retired and was like, okay, what is my last chapter now about? He called it my last act. So that was really beautiful. So that's the seed group, right? The first group. And then we have the root group, which is when you've planted your seeds, you know your focus, you know what this chapter is going to be about, and then you want to go deeper, right? There comes a point in many people, if they try to, change the education system or work towards more women's rights or address racism or fascism, address climate change, etc., that often we reach this place where we realize that the strategies that we were taught are just insufficient for the complexity of the challenges, and we need to go deeper. The root causes run deeper, so our strategies need to be more profound and more transformative. So that's the root group. So that's the second kind of issue or challenge or topic. And then the last group, I call them the bloom group, which is an aspirational title, but this is really people who have done the work to understand systems change, to understand paradigm shifts, and are doing this work in practice in the field. And there it's all about how can we, rather than them burning out, support them to bloom and to thrive in this work. And so I've kind of structured my offerings along, those lines. And of course, because one kind of builds on the other, I felt like I should start with the seed group. So I knew I wanted to offer an online journey, which I then did, which is called the Change Work Compass. I ran it live in spring of 2025 and in fall of 2025, sold out both time, amazing success. But before the online program, I wrote this book. So the book, in a way, laid the foundation of the process, right? Like if I would help someone uncover their purpose with this a little bit systems informed perspective of depth and transformation, what would that look like? And so I knew that's the book I wanted to write first. And then the second one would be all about developing a systems change strategy. And the third one would be about how to not burn out and how to stay resilient and how to resource yourself and etc. and really navigate the challenges of this work. So I started writing this in spring of 2024. And at first, it was incredibly hard. I wasn't getting anywhere. I would always put it off, say, oh, I'll start writing tomorrow. I'll start writing tomorrow. Then tomorrow came, and I would again say, I'll write tomorrow. And at some point, I realized, okay, something here is not like it's not clicking. It's not working. I'm not getting anywhere with this. And so I decided for myself that I would write right after waking up, coffee in hand, still in bed, oftentimes, coffee in hand, and I would just write. And I would set a timer for at least 5 minutes. This was like the goal that I had to reach. Like, no matter what, you must write for 5 minutes, and that's it. And then if, momentum comes and I want to write more, amazing, I can write for hours. And if not, if it's tedious and it's a foggy day and, the brain is not there, the inspiration is not there, then I can stop. But this reframe was so transformative for a number of reasons. First, it gave me a target that was actually achievable, right? Because if the brain feels like the target is writing a chapter, the target is writing 10 pages, that is so big that I don't even want to start. And this is also something I learned I have ADHD. So from kind of going through, a burnout and ADHD diagnosis, etc., I learned a lot of strategies on like how the dopamine system works, etc. And that is a key one, but I think it works for everybody. Rather than I need to clean the whole house today, tell yourself, I will vacuum with fun music for 5 minutes. And I bet you motivation is going to come. And then suddenly you're like riding that wave of momentum and you're cleaning more and more, etc. Right. So that is one key hack, like put the bar a lot lower, allowing yourself to stay consistent. And if that's all you can do a day, then that's already right. So much more than not writing at all because you keep putting it off. And it can open the door to momentum and to writing so much more and for it to actually become enjoyable. So that was incredible for me. That was really transformative. And it was not Instagrammable. I was really like having just woken up, like at the beginning at least, I would have my partner like, "Hey, please give me the coffee and the laptop and just push it on me and have me write. Over time, when the habit was more like, fixed, I was able to do that myself. But especially at first, it was also helpful to have that support and to have a very specific like clicking moment, right? Like what is the trigger moment that means now is time to write? And it doesn't have to be when you wake up and your first coffee, right? It could totally be whenever I am cooking lunch while the lunch is like in the oven, that's a little bit when I write. Or whenever I've brought the kids to school, the first thing I do when I come back is I make a coffee and then I write, right? So anchor it into something that is part of your daily routine that you can typically always do it then at the same time. Like one behavior will trigger the other. And I had a little reward for myself too. Like the coffee was the reward for actually writing. Right? So yeah, that's a little bit about how I went about writing that book. And once I was in that rhythm, it actually only took a couple months to have a first draft.
Brilliant. I love how you've kind of gone through that process there and given so many little tips around habit stacking and how to bring it into something that you already have a routine for. I was going to ask you whether you wrote on the laptop or you wrote by hand, but you said you had the computer thrust into you with the coffee. Did you have to leave the coffee until you'd finished, or was that part of you
Yeah, it was
sipped as you
like
went?
first sip after first words written.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I mean, what you've explained there, I think it's when people sit down and they think, oh, and they say that everybody's got a book in them, whether that's a memoir, whether that's a fiction book, whether that's something that you write about your career, a process that you do in work. But to think about the finish, yeah, you can't almost think about the end. Not the end goal, because obviously you want to think about the end goal, but the size of it is what I'm trying to say, that it's difficult to think, can I really put something together that's big? It's more than a blog article, it's more than a social media post. This is a proper manuscript. But just to start with 5 minutes a day I'm about a third of the way through a fiction book. And I shelved it last year just because other things I needed to focus on first. But I didn't have that kind of ritual. And I think if I'd have started that way, I might be a little bit more beyond the 35,000 words that I've written. Because for me, it was more, when do I feel it? And then I'll write. But sometimes when I felt it, there was something else that needed more of my attention, something with the family or something with work or something in the house. And I think how you've described that is just the perfect ritual to get started. I take it wasn't a morning pages type process, stream of consciousness writing. It was just let's just get something down.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a big myth that, to me, it's a myth anyway, that like inspiration will strike and then, right? Sometimes it may happen, very rarely, but to design our craft around the lightning bolt occasional moment is to me like we are setting ourselves up for failure, especially if, as you say, when it strikes, sometimes you can't, right? There's kids running around and there's food on the stove and I'm in a meeting, like it's not possible, right? So to me, that was an important myth to kind of also dispel from myself. Like it's a craft. It's like meditating. Like maybe I don't want to meditate, but I will, or like working out or anything, like anything that you need to do steadily and continuously and daily potentially to get better at or to get closer to your goal. That is something that to me requires some gentle structure and not wishful thinking and I'll do it when I'm inspired to do it. So that was an important reframe that I had to kind of go through for me, and also to accept like it's not going to feel incredible all the time. Like it is a goal to over time make it more enjoyable, and part of that is by setting a smaller target, having a reward, like getting that, you know, feeling of I'm making progress. That in itself makes it more enjoyable. But sometimes I'll sit there and I'll be like, no, nothing is coming. And I'm just like, blah, 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 and trying my best, but it's not flowing. And that's okay. Like that's also part of the process. Like if everything we do would always be just, you know, hilarious and super fun and flowy, I mean, in that case, everyone would have written a book, right? Already. So yeah, that for me was quite important. And that then led me to create this writing with flow container, which is basically putting all of what I'm saying here. Again, I'm not a person who gatekeeps, so I always share all my tips very openly. But basically, what writing with flow is I guide people through the steps of creating a writing routine that really works for them, and we kind of workshop it, right, week by week until it really sits. You also have this additional like accountability, right? Like you're not just alone and telling yourself I'll do it tomorrow, but like I'll be following up like, hey, so how did it go this week, right? So that also often helps. It's another ADHD hack. And one more ADHD hack is the body doubling. It's like when you do things alongside other people, even if they're not at all helping you, just the fact that you know that they're there makes it easier for you to do the task. And so I host weekly writing sessions. We just get online, we say, hi, how are you doing? And then I put lo-fi music on and we just write. And we're on Zoom and we just write. So kind of that combination, I think, has been really great for people who have gone through it and committed to the process, because they get all the tips to actually create that writing routine. Then they get the additional accountability to stick with it, to keep refining it. And there is this support of like actually sitting down to write. But yeah, if I were to summarize some of the tips, I mean, like we said, like anchoring it into an existing habit, having ideally a daily, because that's the easiest to remember kind of rhythm. Because otherwise you're like, oh, is it Monday or Tuesday today? Like, should I do it or not? Right? It already opens the door to like not having it be automatic. Although I would say if you have something you do, for example, 3 times a week, say you go to, I don't know, your yoga or Pilates class, or you go to a painting class 3 times a week, then potentially you could link it to that as well. But it needs to be something that's already steady in your life. So for me, the waking up and having my coffee was the easiest, but it may be different for you. So anchoring it into a habit, ideally daily, or at least something steady, making a really small target, like 5 minutes and a timer goes off. Or if you want, you could try words. I personally find that time works better because, again, like if I'm like, oh, 100 words, like I don't even know what that looks like, but it feels like a lot in my brain. Whereas I say 5 minutes, I'm like, that's doable. If I can spend 5 minutes scrolling Instagram, I can spend 5 minutes writing. So that's fine. Add a reward, right? So for me, reward was coffee. And then kind of through the process of continuously showing up and doing it, you begin stacking, this is what James Clear says, like stacking the proof that you are consistent, that you are doing the thing. And then that in itself makes it easier to keep with it and stay with it. And over time, this also shifts our identity, right? Until we say, oh, I am a writer because I've been writing, right? I may not feel like a writer if I pushed it off for 6 months or a year, but if I'm writing 5 minutes a day, over time consistently, this makes me feel more like I am actually a writer. So yeah, those are some of the key tips I would say. Or maybe the last thing would be to create pockets where inspiration is actually possible, right? Because what we know about flow state, about becoming inspired, very often it requires idle time, right? So it requires being outside and taking a walk in nature without anything, without even a podcast, or sitting by a river and just having our journal there and no other distractions, or right, like something that could be today called boredom, but it's just kind of blank space for your consciousness to come online and the clarity to reveal itself. and having some form of also structure around creating these things. So it's again, it's not like I'll go for a walk whenever I have time. It's like every other day or every Wednesday, I go for a forest walk if that's the thing that really works for you, or I'll go for a swim in the lake, or right. So also creating those pockets. And then if nothing interesting happens, that's fine. Like it's not, again, we're not trying to, right? It doesn't, if it has this energy of like I'm forcing it, then usually it's not gonna flow. So writing with flow means also like allowing, creating space and then flowing with it when something does show up.
Yeah, you've mentioned so many good practices there. I was going to mention James Clear, Atomic Habits. I've read that earlier on in the year. Include that in the show notes because I think it gives a lot of advice that mirrors what you were saying there about stacking those habits and attaching it to something else. And yeah, just having those words come out, and even if it doesn't flow, I think just having the intention that you're going to keep turning up, creating that space for yourself. Slowing down is definitely a big thing that we don't give ourselves time to do these days. There's so much going on, so much coming at us online, in life in general. So we really do need that space to think creatively and to let things flow. And that's nice time to be with us, to be with ourselves as well, and to hear us aside from everyone else.
Exactly. That's what it's all about to me. And then I think if we try to implement these things and, also allow ourselves to fail sometimes, right? Sometimes it just does not work. But then can we, that's also something James Clear says, like, do not miss twice. Right? So like if you didn't do it yesterday, that is not a reason to not do it the next day. Like it's time to pick it back up. And then if you miss again a day, that's fine, right? But we want to keep up the habit rather than fall out of it and lose all sense of momentum and progress. So by implementing those things, in looking back, once I was in it, writing the book was actually the easiest part. It was hard, especially when I started, but afterwards I had this process of like having to figure out publishing, right? So I don't know where you're at on this, but I was like researching a couple of publishers that I thought could be a match. And then someone told me, well, look, you're going to have to find an agent most likely who's going to pitch your book. And then you're going to hear back. And like, it may take like 2 years until that's sorted and maybe longer until the book is actually out, even if you're successful. And I was like, what? I already have the book, right? So I would understand if I was pitching an idea and discussing advances or whatever, but I already had written the thing. So I was like, no, 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 this is way too tedious, way too long. I'm going to self-publish. And then little did I know that self-publishing, especially if you're trying to do many other things, right? If that's your sole focus, your sole project, probably much smoother. And if you've done it before, right, the second book is going to be so much easier for me than the first in terms of the publishing process. But for the first, it was like learning an entire new language, like what type of edits you need and where you find these editors and the costs of these edits, and then the designers and the things and the publishers and the printers. And oh, turns out all the like Amazon and whatever, these printers are pretty unethical and don't even print on like certified paper. So you don't know if the book you hold is from deforestation projects or not. So especially if you want to do it with some degree of like ethics and quality and right, maybe I probably also tend to perfectionism a little bit. So I really want it to be a beautiful product, more complex project also because it's a guide that you actually write onto the pages. So like a guided journal almost. So all of that together meant I couldn't just take the quick route because you could technically finish your book today, put it into a software, put it out tomorrow, right? Especially if it's a text only, black and white, like it is possible. But yeah, to me, all that complexity that I was inviting in with this project, plus the fact that I had many other things going on, different projects and so on. It's been 2 years, right? So like, and I'm now at the stage where I'm about to hire a designer for the interior book and the cover, etc. But it's taken me at the end longer or equally as long as the actual publishing route that I was kind of warned about early on. So yeah, everyone can make their own, choices, and it depends maybe on who you are and your audience and what you want, and you get more creative freedom if you do self-publishing, which is great. But just to be mentally prepared for, like, it's not necessarily a shortcut in terms of it being quicker. And maybe once I'm through with the process, I'll probably like add an add-on to writing with flow and maybe a blog post kind of explaining, the steps and the decisions that I had to make and the different options, and share also the options I went with at the end in case anyone would like to look those up. But yeah, just to be really transparent that the writing part in the end was the easy part to me compared to all the tedious project management and editing and figuring it out after the fact.
Yeah, and appreciate your honesty with that as well. And I think creating a little guide, a little blog article about that process is going to be a really helpful resource for people. But I think as well, how you've described that, it's the process that you went through, the time you took to source the material, the printing process, how that was all going to come together aligns with your values, which is important. If you had have ignored some of that, even doing one aspect of that, and put something out there into the world, it probably wouldn't have sat right with you because there'd be something niggling there that you knew you'd kind of rushed over a little bit. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but that's kind of how I see that, from talking to you at such a short space of time. That's very important for you to have gone through that process and taken your time.
For sure. Yeah. Integrity is my probably my number one value. And of course, we all live in broken systems, so we must make compromises. It's not about trying to be perfect, but you're absolutely correct that if I had just uploaded to KDP and called it a day, something in me wouldn't have felt like that was right. And maybe that would have led me to like not promote the book as much because I'm a little bit ashamed inside or whatever, right? So like or regretting that I didn't spend more time at least trying to find an alternative. So this is also important, right? Sometimes you don't find an alternative. It's just not possible and you have to go with the thing that is there, even though you're not fully aligned with it. But in this case, I did find some options. It's going to cost me more money. The book is probably going to be a bit more expensive in color, etc. But yeah, that's kind of the path that I chose. And we'll make a black and white version that is cheaper as well so we have different price points that allows different people to engage with the work.
Yeah, I think it's nice that you've thought through that process as well. I produce some of my own diaries and journals, and I had a chat with somebody a few weeks ago who her main line of work is forest school. So she teaches a lot in schools, forest school with the kids. But she's ADHD, she's got a level of autism as well. And it was a really helpful conversation to have because she made me think about yes, some of the ways that I create my journals and diaries in, a different layout, a different format for people, but also some of the materials to use, even going as far as I don't have one in front of me, but my journals are wiro bound just because I personally think that's easier for people to be able to fold them around and, play around with them. You don't get the creasing down the spine. And, I'm very precious about books and journals and things like that. Probably too much really. But yeah, she got me thinking about, the plastic element of that and, the sustainability element of that. And I thought, I really need to spend some time. And when I come to doing, a new batch or produce some new materials, that needs to be something that's, up there that I need to get right.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great that you're willing to look into it. I think as you say, like it's a continuous process, right? Of like learning more and oh, I didn't know about that. I didn't think about that. Oh, is there an alternative? And we're all just trying to figure it out and do our best. And I think that's if that's the commitment that everyone would bring, we wouldn't be in such a terrible place with the earth and with each other, right? So yeah, really, really good for all of us and the listeners as well who are trying their best.
Yeah, definitely. So we've touched on quite a lot already. Let's move on to your journaling practice because I'm right in thinking that it follows the cycle of the moon. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, before we were following a solar calendar, we were lunar people, right? Like our people, of course, day and night is obvious, right? You always are affected by the day and night, but we followed the cycles of the moon. And to me, when I say my people, I mean like people of Celtic lineage, which is like the culture that emerged from what is now Switzerland and surrounding areas, and then migrated north. So as well, like let me read it out. So it's very well known or often associated with places like Ireland or Wales, but in fact, it originated in these lands that I am from. And of course, we lost it so much longer ago, right? Due to being closer to the Roman Empire and easier to conquer, etc. And then the Germanic people as well, and a mix of that. But truly, all indigenous cultures that I know of had a lunar cycle, right? Like followed and paid attention to these and to these. It makes sense. We pay attention to what's around us. And if you can think about like seeing the moon change by day, like day by day by day, when do you see it? When do you not see it? When do you see it in full? When do you see it in the night? When do you see it in the day? Like all those things are markers of time, right? So it makes sense that any civilization who had some time on their hands and paid attention would have noticed. And to me, what's really beautiful about following a rhythm like that is like the moon will do what she does, like she'll be doing her thing. Like it's not me. I don't have to set a calendar reminder. I don't have to put an alarm on my phone or make something happen in a certain time. It's like if I can anchor to the moon, and if you're someone who has a hormonal cycle, right, and a moon time, as people also call it, or a bleed time, very often that actually aligns with the full moon. In some cases, we are off or we shift for different reasons and contraceptives, etc. But in my case, it also happens to like actually align with this. Anyway, so long story short, I would say that the moon is just it's real. It's there. It goes through these cycles, and it's helpful for me to anchor my reflection practice, my journaling practice in that. Of course, it would be amazing to do it daily. Like if anyone has a daily practice or weekly practice, fantastic. I historically have not been able to keep that up. Even the one with the moon, I struggle sometimes. And if I'm super busy around the new moon, then I miss it. And then I'm like, oh no. So yeah, but the aspiration is that whenever there's a new moon, I spend some time to inquire into my intentions. I may cross-check with astrology, right? Like which sign is the moon in? Are there any aspects? Is there anything that I kind of need to look at? I usually follow the work of Chani Nicholas. If anyone knows her, she's a really cool astrologer who's also very progressive and, has politics, that not just this kind of, sometimes I find that astrology discourse can be a little bit like, now is the time to manifest financial abundance. Meanwhile, there's a genocide going on, like a little bit like disconnected from reality and kind of ego focused. And her work is definitely not. It will have that personal dimension of like what might be alive for me based on my, chart, etc. But she will also always speak to the general, like the collective things that we might be going through and the power struggles that we may experience, etc. So I really appreciate this about her. So shout out to Chani. But yeah, so I will spend some time on the new moon reflecting what are my intentions for the coming cycle, potentially inspired by some prompts from the astrology side of things, sometimes not. And then on the new moon, I will reflect on my intentions and I'll be like, okay, did I embody my intention this month? How far did I come with it? Is there anything I need to recalibrate for the remaining part of the cycle? Or maybe something to let go? Because also that's when the moon starts to, right, like from our perspective, become smaller again. So is there anything I need to shed and let go? It's usually a very introspective time also because of my own cycle, right? The cycle that my body goes through. So yeah, that's a little bit what I try to do. I'm not always perfect with it. There's no massive science behind it or anything like that. It's just something I've started doing, I don't know, maybe years ago. And it feels right to me. Maybe it's worth a try if someone is trying to build up a journaling practice and daily feels overwhelming. Can you do it twice a month? A moon cycle is more or less a month. So yeah, maybe that is a rhythm that is actually feasible. And when there is an external, visual reminder almost to engage with that practice again.
Yeah, I like that. I've not actually heard that as a following a journaling practice for the moon, but I like the sound of aligning with the energy, the lunar, and visually you can see the moon, you can see the stars, and it's a it feels like a nourishing way to approach journaling as a way in, and to be able to connect as well with something that's so, what's the word I'm looking for? Natural, but it's definitely a way that people can start, because one of the misconceptions about journaling is that they need to do it every day, that you need to have, a practice every day. So to follow a cycle seems a little bit more feasible and achievable.
So I looked it up, and the cycle of the moon actually lasts 29.5 days. This cycle, often called the lunar cycle or lunation, differs from the time it takes for the moon to orbit the Earth relative to the stars, 27.3 days. So that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
which is about 29 days, roughly a month. So twice a month journaling practice.
Yeah. Lovely. What do you think about the trips to the moon at the moment?
Oh, yeah, I saw that a lot was, there was a lot of buzz about it. And some people seem to find hope and unity. And I know some political messages were spoken there too. I wasn't so engaged, but I'm definitely not a big fan of sending just very rich people to space for a couple minutes, and meanwhile we could be solving poverty and climate change. It just seems we have more important things to do, and yeah, better use for these resources. Not to mention the CO2 emissions and right, like the
Mm.
harm that is done in that way. So I don't think Katy Perry needs a selfie in space. I think we could have gone without.
I'm completely with you on that one. Yes, there are more important things to focus on. I mean, space exploration and, finding different worlds out there has a place. But yes, we need to sort ourselves out on this planet and this planet first. So you mentioned time in nature when referencing poetry and journaling, and that being one of the environments that genuinely regenerates you, gives you some more energy. And I find that as well. I love hiking, trail running, just sitting by, an ancient tree. That is very, very regenerating for me. So it'd be lovely to end on hearing about, if you could tell us more about how you resource and regenerate your energy for your writing and your activism. Where do you go? What do you do?
So to me, reminding myself that we are actually nature, like for all our shelteredness, for all our conditioning around having to dominate nature and being a part, etc. We are nature. Like we are more connected to the trees than we could possibly know, right? We wouldn't have oxygen to breathe if not for these amazing beings. So yeah, to kind of remind, not just on a like rational level, but really also on a physical level, that we are a part of this, right? That for all the technology and all the abstraction that I'm engaged in, this is still who I am, and this is where I belong, and this is what grounds me. And so, I mean, we've heard lots of studies about the positive effect of being exposed to nature and forest bathing as a practice, etc. So there's lots out there. To me, it could either be a walk in the forest, or especially also I'm very partial to bodies of water. So like being by a lake, mountain lakes, I find especially beautiful when they're these very clear lakes and you see mountains in the background. It's just also the Swiss, landscape that's very much imprinted in me, but equally rivers. Yeah, sometimes even going to, for example, the hammam. It might not be in nature, but it's like spending time in water with heat, right? There's just something very embodied about it. So yeah, I try to alternate different types of practices, whether that's just enjoying a beautiful view for a while, going for a walk, going by or into bodies of nature, having a fire, having a candle, right? Like burning when I do something to just remind myself that I am these elements, I am in contact with them and invite them more kind of into my field of awareness.
Yeah. Do you wild swim then?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Switzerland, we have the chance that our rivers and lakes are clean enough to
Mm.
be that you can actually swim in them. It's a very common practice and it's free, it's accessible to everyone, right? So this I feel very, very fortunate to have. And I actually recently found out again that it was due to a massive investment done in at the end of the last century to clean up, right? It's not like Switzerland always had the cleanest rivers, etc. It used to be a time when it was tolerated that companies would just pollute and dump things, etc. And there was a massive effort to set up cleaning stations to tighten regulations, etc. So also there, just a reminder that just because that's how it used to be doesn't mean like it has to be like that, right? We've also seen Paris go through an amazing effort to like regreen the city, keep cars more out of the city. It's been tremendous. So change is definitely possible. And when we learn again to appreciate the beauty of nature and invite it back into our lives, so many things can unlock higher quality of life, more happiness, better health, more joy, right? So many things. I'm a huge fan of taking action, both individually and collectively, for everyone's right to access these spaces.
Yeah, amen to all of that. And it's nice to be able to hear, what's happened in the past and the policies and the change that's been made. We don't have access to that enough, and that there must be some more pressure put on general media to deliver those stories to the general public. Because if we're already into that, if we're already walking in those spaces, we know what to refer to, we know who to hang out with, we know what to do, we know who to speak to, what to ask. But if you're not, how do you know this information? Because, our standard sources, quote unquote, of the media, we don't hear about it. It's important. People like you, change work, it's important. So, so important.
Yeah. And for all of us, I think to really learn, yeah, relearn to appreciate, right? And also then defend it, right? I think there's a lot of talk now about the matriarchy, and maybe it sounds like a scary term, but what it really means is just to be in service of that which is life-giving, right? To be in service of protecting children, not letting children come to harm, right? Protecting nature, which is us, which is the basis of our subsistence. So really not putting all of those things underneath profit as the highest value, which is what patriarchy is really built on, right? So there to have this sense of being together and the power also that we hold collectively if we put our imaginations, our energy, right? Our spirit, our inspiration in service of that which seems sacred and important to us, which is often the things that literally are important because they protect life. And without them, life is not possible. So that's, I think, something I always like to remind people that they are, in fact, artists, that they are, in fact, creatives, that they can, right, create. And that is not just art in the sense of a painting or a book. That is also a better world. That is also a change in the circumstances, right? Like it is, at the end of the day, people who decide to create a new future, to create a new piece of art that will inspire people to reflect, etc. Like all of those things are acts of transformation.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and transformation itself is creative. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your work, Nora. Apart from the book, which is coming, you'll have to let me know when you have a release date after the cover's done. But what's next for you?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's a scary phase, like it becomes so real when the book moves from being in a document to like actually a design and a cover design. So that's really, really exciting. I've created a little like book launch club on our WhatsApp community, but I can also create one on Instagram if people are interested, just for people who are keen to like follow along the journey, right? So I'll share updates. I'm considering this publisher, but I'm not sure, la la la, etc. So maybe vote on the cover design. So anyone who's kind of keen to hear about that process and maybe also support the book when it comes out or when the cover is announced, for example, is super welcome to get in touch, and I'll get them added to that. I'm also planning on hosting again Writing with Flow. I don't know exactly when. Again, there, let me know if that's something that would be supportive in the near future, and then I'll be happy to respond to that need as well. Potentially hosting an embodied poetry journey, a soul volume workshop, right, for people to tune into the power of these practices and discover that poet within, perhaps, or at least the oracle, the clarity, the wisdom that is already there. So that's kind of on the side of the well. We're definitely continuing to have offerings of all modalities, right, besides writing, as I mentioned before, from dancing, conscious movement, to painting, to working with clay. And again, all with the approach that it is for the process, not for a product. It's not about learning a skill. It's about being with the process and let that reveal profound insights for us. So I think that's what's ahead for the well. We may host another retreat also in Switzerland. We've had one last year, which was also amazing and sold out and just really beautiful. And I'm still working on everything on the Paraima front with systems change and supporting people in finding their purpose, etc. So yeah, lots going on, but I'm excited. And I'm also working on a more, less in the public sphere, but I'm also working on reconnecting to land, to my indigenous lineage, to the traditions of the Celtic and Germanic people. That's also a big priority for me. It's not something I'm necessarily putting out there as much because I'm not offering things in that space necessarily, except, privately, locally, a little women's circle, following the wheel of the year, things like that. But that's also really, yeah, an important part of my priorities actually for the year.
Yeah, and it's part of who you are, and it sounds as though it's another what you're doing there is another way to regenerate yourself, re-energize yourself. And as when you talk about all of it, you can see it, you lit up in your face just talking about it. So you can see that energy flowing just around you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It feels very alive. Still new, right? Like still vulnerable, not 100% sure if it's going to take a shape ever, what that may look like, but it feels important. And so I've learned over the years to trust that if something feels important, feels like it's calling my name, even though it doesn't make rational sense, it's not, in the linear trajectory, it will make sense later on. I'm just trusting that.
Yeah, for sure. You're putting in some work now, whether that reveals itself now, a month's time, a year's time, you're on the journey and everything happens for a reason in, the order that it's meant to happen. So yeah, you're starting with the groundwork and letting to use that nature metaphor again, the seeds.
Exactly.
It's going to blossom. So how best can people connect with you, Nora, to learn more? We'll add this in the show notes. Is it the website? Have you got a certain community to direct people to?
For sure. So there's definitely an opportunity to just connect with me directly, and you'll find both on my social media profiles and also on my website, kind of the link to the pathway, right? To check out more the Well Change Atelier, if that's what speaks to you, if it's these art-based practices to take care of yourself, to reconnect, to get to clarity, etc. That will be the avenue that's more about the well. Also, Writing with Flow that we've talked about quite a bit is hosted there. The poetry piece is hosted there. And then on the other hand is more the Paraíba path, which is more for people who may be wondering, what is my contribution? What is my purpose right now? How can I make a difference? How can I really contribute to this transformation that we are engaged in and that's still ahead of us? Then that would be, the other place that you can really connect, and you'll find lots of offerings. In both cases, we have free things to try and see if it speaks to you. Lots of free resources available. We share a lot of our knowledge openly, as I said, no gatekeeping. And then there's kind of spaces, opportunities for deeper support, like online group journeys, workshops, things like that. And it would be my pleasure, whatever supports. I think I'm very much here to support the givers of this world, the people who care, whether they're creatives, activists, right, change makers, to support them in also caring for themselves and for their own gifts so that they can keep showing up.
Yeah, we have to put the time and effort into us first before we can actually give to the world and to others. Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much, sharing your wisdom, sharing your processes, all of those ideas and structures that you refer to. You've given such a lot this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna, for having me. Thank you for all the listeners. I'm really looking forward to hear if anything resonates, if there is a call in you to reach out. I would say trust that, as we've said before, and looking forward to see what we weave together.
Yeah, trust in yourself and just take action, make change.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you'd like to continue your journaling journey with me, I hold in-person journaling circles across Staffordshire and Cheshire and a range of online workshops throughout the year. You're also warmly invited to join the Journaling Nook, my online monthly membership for £25. This includes 2 live journaling circles per month, weekly writing prompts and a monthly guest workshop. Visit writingwithpurpose.co.uk for details on all of these, including a free PDF journal planner download. All the details are also in the show notes. Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings 2 of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.